days of the 2023-24 college basketball season are now in the books. On Tuesday night, the headliner, Baylor-Auburn in Sioux Falls. Final score, Scott Drew's Bears 88, Bruce Pearl's Tigers 82. Jacoby Walter was the star, five-star freshman, took 13 shots. He made 7 of them, finished with 28 points, 6 rebounds in 34 minutes. Deadleg, let's just start there. What'd you make of the Jacoby Walter show in Sioux Falls last night?
Well, we told you about Jacoby Walter multiple times leading up to the season, did we not? And man, oh man, what a debut. Really good. And just a quick epilogue on our rant to start the season. Just give us a couple more of these kind of matchups, man. Not everyone's going to be as entertaining as this one was on Tuesday night, but Baylor and Auburn, they came to play, and they look like, even though there was some erratic play and maybe some questionable shot selection here or there, whatever, man. It was an entertaining game, and those teams looked like they had more than just a few games under their belts at that point, and didn't look like they were playing the first game of the season. So credit, of course, again to Scott Drew and Bruce Pearl for getting that done. Hopefully more coaches can do that. It really kind of, I don't want to say it saved the first 2 days of the season, because it didn't. In fact, we have some stunning results that we're going to get to, but this one was a joy. Baylor closing the game on a 16-5 run. Walter was the star, but if you watched Baylor play, GP, I mean, they just have. This is partly why I picked them to be a top 5 team by season's end. When I do my rankings, I'm not saying that's what they're going to look like in the first game, the first week, even the first month of the season. But I think by the time we get to the middle of March, I think Baylor is going to have one of the 5 best crews in the sport. And they have the length, they have the shooting, they have the defense, they have the size, they've got the roster and the depth. You just saw so much of it there. I mean, even small stuff like Jaden Nunn having 3 steals, and he was maybe the 5th most important player on the floor for Baylor. Walter was the biggie, though. I mean, him having 28 in his college debut, it's the most by a Big 12 freshman since, I'm sure you're aware of this. Beasley went for 32 against Sacramento State in his first game for K-State. So there hadn't been a freshman in the league that had gone for that many in the, 14, 15 years since. He was awesome. Yves Missi he came off the bench. He had 10 points, but his steal that led to a transition dunk over Janai Broom. And then I believe on the ensuing play, there was a block. And then I think like 2 plays later, he had another play on the defensive end that led to a transition bucket for Baylor. It was big time, because Baylor came back. I mean, Baylor was trailing, I want to say, from midway through the first half until the final, 2.5 minutes there, Parrish. Impressive resolve from Scott Drew's team. We can get to Auburn in just a second, but Walter already, I mean, just mark it down, knock on wood, hopefully no injury, lock lottery pick, and it can and probably will work his way into definitive status in the top 10 for the 2024 draft. There is so much to love about his game.
During the offseason, I think as recently as last week when we did the big preview episode for CBS Sports Network, we were talking through, guys who could emerge as household names or faces of the sport. And you had your list, and one of the points I made is that it is often a freshman, and sometimes a freshman that, he was a 5-star guy, McDonald's All-American, but he's not somebody unless you're a diehard, living on 24/7 sports, you might not know who this person is. 2 years ago, it was Jabari Smith at Auburn. Jabari Smith could have walked around any campus in America 2 days before he played his first game at Auburn, and nobody would have known who he was. That might have also been true at Auburn. He quickly emerged as a candidate to be the number 1 pick in the draft and one of the best players in the country for a very, very good team. Last season, Brandon Miller, more or less at Alabama, did the exact same thing. And so the point I made last week is there will be a guy who does that this year. Like Bronny James is the most famous freshman. DJ Wagner, maybe right there behind him. And those guys are both immensely talented on their own, but mostly famous because of who their fathers, or in DJ's case, even grandfather, is. Most of these other guys are, again, if you follow recruiting rankings, you might recognize them. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't. But somebody always emerges, and through 2 days, it's just 2 days, but through 2 days, Jacoby Walter looked like he fits the bill. He looked like a guy who could be in consideration, and obviously is, to be the number 1 pick in the 2024 NBA draft. On Yves Missi, I was going to give you credit. I believe multiple times this offseason you said the buzz out of Waco is connected to that guy. Yeah, Walter's going to be great, but this other freshman from Cameroon, he's got some stuff that makes him a very intriguing prospect. And as you saw him and this is the type of stuff, it just saw him running around out there. I mean, yes, he had 10 points, 2 blocks, 2 steals in 18 minutes off the bench, but just the way he moves.
Correct.
So yes. At one point said that's what an NBA prospect looks like or something like that. And it was interesting to see him because I mean, he looked like an impactful player already. And you mentioned the depth at Baylor. I believe Scott had earlier this season, preseason, in advance of getting started, said he thought this was maybe, his most talented team and one of, if not the, not talented. Let me take that back. Deepest teams and maybe one of the deepest, if not the deepest team in the country. And a lot of that was on display last night. I, like you, appreciated that they scheduled that game, Bruce and Scott. I actually texted the 4 coaches who created the 2 best games for Monday and Tuesday. Bruce Pearl, Andy Enfield, Scott Drew, and Jerome Tang, and was like, hey, just appreciate you guys not being cowards and being willing to test your teams in the season opener. I wish there were more coaches like you. And Scott was like, yeah, you get to have a drink and enjoy it tonight. We got to sweat the whole thing out. And they did have to sweat it out. But without that, yeah, we had some bad matchups that turned into some interesting games. Yeah. We'll get to those. But if you're looking for a game that's worth watching, there was, on a surface level, there was really just 2 scheduled for the first 2 days. And I'm glad we had them, because without that one last night, it would have been an easy night just to watch election coverage, I guess.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful watch. And yeah, to your point on Missi, I can almost guarantee you that after, maybe 1 or 2 trips down the floor, the first time he was out there, that Auburn players, there was almost maybe like a buzz or an energy around their heads, because his presence seems to change the dynamic on the floor. And again, that steal transition dunk was just was outrageous. The first true ridiculous highlight of the season there. Credit to him. Also, Walter, by the way, he went 10 for 10 from the line. Just small stuff like that. He could be really a must-see player, and that was a big time spot.
And he was taking long threes. He was running off of screens, catching, getting his feet set, launching. He looked like an NBA shot maker at 6'5" in day one. That's a great place to start.
Very easy to see. No Baylor freshman had ever scored as much in their debut as Walter's 28. By the way, Baylor has won 20. Credit to Baylor Sports and Information for this. This is just incredible. Baylor's 20-1 in its last 21 games in neutral sites against non-conference opponents. The only loss came against Virginia in November of last year. 20-1 in neutral site non-con matchups. That's unbelievable. And then for Auburn, it's maybe something of a freak trend here, but again, yet again, its first matchup against the top 30, top 40 Ken Palm opponent of a season ends in a loss. This year, it was Baylor. Last season, it was Memphis. The season before that, it was UConn. Season before that, it was Gonzaga. Season before that, it was Florida. Season before that, it was Duke. Season before that, it was deep into the season because Auburn was really good. It was Texas A&M. You have to go back a full decade here. So I do think Auburn's going to be plenty entertaining, plenty fun. Aiden Holloway had 19 off the bench. He shot 4 of 8 from 3-point range. Janai Broom had some really nice moments. He might have range now this season, which is going to be big if that's the case. He had 16 points, 11 boards, stepped up big. Denver Jones had 13. Auburn, and this might be, I don't know if this will be the case with this team yet or not this season, but it has been a team with a lot of unpredictable energy, or at least the predictable part about Auburn is, its games are going to be unpredictable. And there was a little more of that last night. Now, a lot of it was Baylor kind of staying the course, but both teams shot relatively well. I mean, averaged close to or more than 1.1 points per possession, which I thought was pretty huge. Rebounding was pretty even. Turnovers were pretty even. Baylor just got to the free throw line a lot more than Auburn. But Aiden Holloway, A lot of fun. One of my other takeaways was that was a really fun game to watch. Baylor's resolve was impressive. Missi and Walter are undeniable, but Aiden Holloway could wind up being among the 10 to 15 most watchable players in the sport this season, just because he's a little undersized, but has a ton of confidence, a really good handle, and is not afraid. And I assume I don't know if he'll be given an outright green light GP, but he'll have a yellow on every possession to launch from 27, 28 feet, in addition to his playmaking. So good performance out of Auburn. They did let the game slip away, though.
He better have a green light. You seen seen some of the guards that had green lights at Auburn over the past couple of years?
That's another good point. And Katie Johnson is still.
If those guys had green lights, then Aiden Holloway's got to have one.
It's true. It's true. That's true. A rare loss, by the way, for Bruce Brill. He's now 27-2 all time in season openers.
Holloway as you mentioned, came off the bench. That's always interesting. Like, okay, what's going on there? Is it just a message sent or a lesson? Is it something other than that? He did play a team high 27 minutes though. So yes, he started the game on the bench, but he played more minutes than any other Auburn Tiger. Next up for Baylor, John Brown. They got to mess around with John Brown. Okay. I just think it's funny to say you're playing John Brown.
Is John bringing some of his buddies, or is this going to be 5-on-1?
They're just playing John Brown.
Yeah, that's.
Imagine John Brown trying to
funny,
guard.
Like, Scott, we appreciate you setting up this big game to start the season. We love it. Who's next? John Brown.
Oh. Yeah, no, Scott's like, all right, listen, I'll play Auburn first, but then we're playing John Brown. All right? I'll play Auburn, put it in the Pentagon, but after that, send John Brown down to Waco. Bring me John Brown. After they get rid of John Brown, Gardner Webb on Sunday, and then UMKC next Tuesday. Schedule gets a little lighter.
I'll take the trade-off, though. Give me Baylor, Auburn. Give me Auburn as your first game, and if you want to play 3 bye games, I'll just give us something to pop right off the start of the season.
That's
every single time.
That's right. That would be my rule. If you open against a quality opponent, your next 3 can be against John Brown.
We have said it, so it shall be. Also, a shout out to Anthony Smith on Twitter was the closest. I said I tweeted it out. You'd get a shout out on the show, and so shout out, here it is. Closest to the pin. Final score. The closest one we had more than 40 responses. Guessed 83-76, a Baylor win. 88-82. Credit to you, Anthony Smith. Thanks for following the show.